Okay.
I open the traffic engineer veil of silence.
Church Planning Commission to order. Ms. Bazemore, would you please call the roll?
Chair Krosner,
I'm here.
Vice Chair Stevens,
Here.
Mr. Puentes,
Here.
Ms. Teets,
Here.
Ms. Weiss,
Here.
Ms. Colmont, here, Mr. Hyra. Thank you.
Okay. And Mr. Hira will join us late, apparently. So, okay, and I will go ahead and read the required remote meeting announcement. The meeting for which this agenda has been posted will be held pursuant to and in compliance with the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, Section 2.2-3708.2, and state and local legislation adopted to allow continued government operation during the COVID-19 declared emergency. All participating members of the Planning Commission will be present at this meeting through electronic means, and all members of the public view the meeting at our website, which is www.fallschurchva.gov/PC, and on Falls Church City Television, which is Cox Channel 11, RCN Channel 2, or Verizon Fios Channel 35. Public comments are accepted virtually. Anyone who signed up to speak will do so via the meeting video platform in order to speak. Public hearing item or provide general comment typically would have needed to complete a speaker form in advance at www.fallschurchva.gov/public comment before noon day of the meeting. Following submission of the form, you will receive emailed instructions on how to join the virtual meeting. Written comments are accepted at our email address, plan@fallschurchva.gov. Those you can do in real time up until the end of the meeting, and they will be sent to us and summarized here at the meeting. So with that out of the way, the next order of business is to adopt our agenda. Tonight we have several action items and a work session. I think things are I think things are logically organized. Unless there are any comments, concerns, or questions, I would ask for a motion to adopt the agenda as printed.
Mr. Chair, I move that we adopt the agenda as indicated on the outline.
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Stevens and Ms. Teets. Any discussion? If not, then a roll call.
Chair Krasner,
Yes?
Mr. Stevens,
Yes.
Ms. Teets,
Yes.
Mr. Puentes,
Yes.
Ms. Weiss,
Yes.
Ms. Colmont,
Yes.
and Mr. Hyra. Thank you.
Okay, so we will go ahead as published. That takes us to number 4, which is speaker series, which we do not have this evening. Then number 5, which is receipt of any petitions for items not on the agenda. I know we received some correspondence for things on the agenda, but did we receive anything else, Ms. Bazemore?
No.
Okay. For the items on the agenda, we'll hit those when we get to those items. All right, so that takes us to number 6, which is our action items. And our first action item, which is 6A, is a public hearing on this subdivision at the West Falls Church site. I'll read the whole thing. It's subdivision plat application number 2019-0322 by FCGP Development, LLC, for approximately 9.78 acres of property owned by the City of Falls Church, addressed at 7124 Leesburg Pike. And so I guess we will start with a staff report, Mr. Stoddard, or Ms. Aubrey. I don't know who's going to give the report.
I'll introduce it briefly before turning it over to Ms. Aubrey. So thank you, Chair Krasner, members of the commission. So the item before you for your final consideration is the subdivision for the West Falls Economic Development Area. This same item was before you as a work session item at your January 5th meeting. And just to touch on the high level picture, this is a subdivision that's required to facilitate the development of the West Falls Church project. The subdivision as submitted is generally consistent with what's already approved on the land. So this isn't in any way changing what's already approved. It's just facilitating what's already been approved. For the specifics and any updates since your work session on January 5th, I'll turn it over to the case planner, Carly Aubrey.
Good evening, Commission. So the Planning Commission has requested to hold a public hearing to review the preliminary and final plats for this subdivision. And staff does recommend that the Planning Commission approve both plats. The proposed subdivision is part of the Barrett's Hill subdivision approved in 2019. And on January 5th, the Planning Commission held a work session to discuss the subdivision. Changes that were made since that work session were to parcel D4, and that was it's for the residential condominium parcel, and it was amended on the southern property line to not include the northern half of Street A. It will still include the on-street parking spaces on the north side of Street A. Staff has completed its review of the application, and no issues are found in regards to policy and code compliance. There would be 4 parcels. The largest one, the 7.6 acres, which includes the majority of the site, would be ground lease, subject to long-term ground leases with the city's Economic Development Authority. Parcel D3, approximately 2/3 of an acre, comprises a future phase 2 office development. That would also be subject to a long-term ground lease from the EDA in the future. And parcel D4 is the 1 acre residential condo parcel, and that would be conveyed ultimately to the development team for construction as a for sale residential condo building. And then parcel D5 comprises the future phase 2 development, which residential condo. And that would either be conveyed in fee or subject to a ground lease, and that would be determined at the phase 2 closing. And the approximate building pad size of that lot would be about 17,000 square feet after taking into account front yard setbacks and sidewalks shown on the special exception site plan. That information is additional based on the comment and question received at the work session. Attachments 4 through 6 provides additional information on the future property agreements and access and utility easements that will ensure the ongoing coordination for the use and maintenance of the site. And these documents will be completed by the time of closing between the city and FCGP and or before the start of construction. As I mentioned, staff determined that the plats are consistent with the comprehensive plan and it meets the zoning ordinance and subdivision code. And at this time, I can answer any questions. And I think I don't have the list open, but I believe somebody from FCGP was planning on attending.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Aubrey. Are there any questions on this application from commissioners? And I see Commissioner Stevens has his hand up, so go ahead.
Yes, I just had a couple of minor technical questions for Ms. Aubrey. I gather there's no parcel D1 anymore, is that correct?
That's correct. That's
Okay.
the original, 9 acre.
Right, there's a block D1, but no parcel D1. And then the other question I had is just, I was looking at the language on the staff report on line 8, and it talks about the proposed subdivision application is generally consistent with the recently approved SEE, et cetera. And I was just wondering, regarding that word generally, is there some way in which it's not consistent with the approved SEE, or am I reading too much into that word generally?
No, I think that word generally could probably have been dropped. It is overlaid on the site plan, so.
Okay, that's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stevens. Any other questions for staff on this item? Not seeing any. Is there anyone from the applicant team that is in attendance?
Yeah, Matthew Stainhook from Hoffman and Associates is here.
Right, Mr. Steenhook, do you have anything you'd like to add? I guess staff gave a pretty good summary. Is there anything you'd like to add?
No, I think the staff gave a very nice and comprehensive summary, and we appreciate your attention to this important step on moving towards closing in a couple months. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Steenhook from the commission? Not hearing any. I know we discussed this at the work session. I think whatever limited questions we had, I believe were dealt with at that meeting. Okay, well then this is a public hearing, and I just will check with Ms. Bazemore. I do not believe we have anyone who signed up to speak. Is that correct, Ms. Bazemore?
We do not. Nope.
Okay, just wanted to check, and we did not receive any written correspondence on this item either. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes.
Just wanted to check. All right then. Well, then I will close the public comment portion of the hearing, since we had no public comment. And then at this point, if there are no further questions from commissioners for either staff or the applicant, then I would look for someone to make a motion. Anyone is feeling so bold?
I can do it, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Fuentes, go ahead.
I move that the Planning Commission approve the preliminary and final plats for the proposed subdivision of the 9.78 acre economic development parcel located at 7124 Leesburg Pike.
Thank you. Mr. Fuentes, do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, just to clarify, do we need the language in the motion or in the title on the staff report?
Well, let's see. Did you read the?
Does their subdivision equal the 9.78 acres?
Let's see. Did you read the title or did you read the motion? I apologize. I didn't catch if you read the other thing. Did you, Mr. Puentes? Can you restate your motion just so?
Sure. From the recommendation, I guess.
I think it should be the proposed, yeah, well, the proposed motion language that staff has suggested is in bold at the top.
Okay.
But it's pretty similar to that, but.
Okay. I withdraw the original motion, and I'll make an amended motion that the Planning Commission grant preliminary and final subdivision plat approval of the subdivision of Barrett's Hills subdivision for property of the city of Falls Church, Virginia.
I'll second.
Okay. Okay, and I think, so we have a motion and a second. I think that hits what Mr. Stoddard was looking for.
Thank you.
The other one might have worked too. But we want to make sure we do it correctly since the subdivision is kind of ends with us. So we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? The only thing I can add is that, again, this is sort of another procedural step, somewhat perfunctory, but we were given a presentation in January that explained what the intent of it is, and staff has confirmed that it meets all requisite requirements of the zoning ordinance and the subdivision code, and the new lots that are being created here will conform to the zoning ordinance. So with that, unless there's any other discussion, then I'll ask Ms. Bazemore for a roll call vote.
Chair Krasner,
Yes.
Mr. Stevens,
Yes.
Ms. Teets,
Yes.
Mr. Puentes,
Yes.
Ms. Weiss,
Yes.
Ms. Colmont,
Yes.
Mr. Hyra. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Let's see here. Moving right along, the next item, which is item 6B, is also a public hearing. And this is a public hearing on a recommendation to City Council on a transfer, and I'll read it, a transfer of, to convey Phase 1 of the 9.78 acre high school economic development parcels of the Falls Church Economic Development Authority in order that the property conveyance is contemplated in the comprehensive agreement can be implemented. And so for this item, I guess, Mr. Stoddard, I guess it's you and Ms. Aubrey again, so take it away.
Sure. Thank you, Chair. Happy to introduce this item before I turn it over to the case planner. So this item is before you for a public hearing item, as well as your recommendation, your final recommendation to council. And a couple things come into play before I turn it over to Carly. So one, you're being asked to make a recommendation. It's one of your charter responsibilities. Whenever the city council acquires or disperses of land. And the specific request here is related to the economic development site. This specific action hasn't been before you as a work session item, but the concept here has long been discussed as the way to make the West Falls Church project happen. And Carly will speak to this in her staff report about, what's the city council's role, what's the EDA's role, why does the land have to be transferred, and of course, the terms of the ground lease necessitated the transfer. And as I said, this has long been talked about as being part of the formula to make the West Falls Church project work. So we have Carly Aubrey on as the case planner, and then also on the call tonight, in case there are any questions, is also the city attorney, Carol McCoskery. But with that, I'll turn it over to Carly Aubrey.
Thank you. So as Paul mentioned, the Planning Commission is requested to provide a recommendation to City Council on this ordinance, and the ordinance was referred to the Planning Commission by Council at their February 14th regular meeting. This ordinance would approve the conveyance of the Phase 1 area, which is about 8.7 acres of the 9.78 acre West Falls project site. And this would be conveyed to the Economic Development Authority. And the land conveyance to the EDA is needed so that the 99-year lease terms contemplated in the comprehensive agreement between the city and the developer of the site can be carried out. When the city entered into the public-private partnership for the commercial development of this site, it was structured as a long-term lease rather than as a simple sale in order to help finance the scale of the development that is contemplated. And the Virginia Constitution limits the length of leases that cities in Virginia can enter into to 40 years. The EDA is not restricted in that way, and so localities will often have an EDA hold property for the purpose of long-term leasing. The conveyance of the Phase 1 area includes two parcels, Parcel D2, which is the residential condo piece, and then, or no, the big piece, and then D4, which is the residential condo piece, and that's shown in attachment 2. Ultimately, parcel D4 would be conveyed in fee simple to the condominium developer, and parcel D2, the largest piece, would be conveyed or be subject to numerous leases of condominium lots, which are still to be created. Section 1707 of the city charter states that proposed conveyances of city land must be submitted to the planning commission for recommendation to city council. So that is why we are here this evening. And staff recommends that the planning commission provide a recommendation of approval of this ordinance to council. And so at that point, we're going to turn it over to questions. And as Paul mentioned, City Attorney Carol McCoskey is here also to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Aubrey. Yeah, this item, obviously, it's getting into a little bit of technical legal waters, at least for me. But I think I would appreciate if Ms. McCroskey can kind of give us a little bit of the sort of legal underpinnings of what, why this is necessary. I think I have some idea why, based on what Ms. Aubrey just described, but sort of how this fits into the process here and the project, which I know has many moving pieces, and this is one of them. But since we have the benefit of having our city attorney here, perhaps she could give us a little bit of that aspect of this.
Sure. I'll try to be a bit brief, and then feel free to ask follow-up questions if you want more information. But essentially, as Ms. Aubrey mentioned, well, I guess we should start with when we began working on this project and discussing it with the developer. It was clear that the developer would not be able to finance a project like the one proposed unless they were able to hold the property either in fee simple or for much longer period than 40 years. And the Virginia Constitution does say that cities cannot lease their property for longer than 40 years. So we turn to this alternative mechanism. The EDA has more flexibility in terms of leases that it can enter into. And so we have always planned since the beginning of this. The developer had asked for a 99-year lease. That has always been the discussions throughout, and that's what's contained in the comprehensive agreement, is the understanding that the leases would be for a period of 99 years. That will enable the developer and all the parties that will develop parts of the property to get financing for this kind of development. You may be aware that there was some talk at one point of Virginia Tech's property being redeveloped, and that fell apart. And my understanding is that partly fell apart because of the inability of Virginia Tech to lease its property for a long period of time. And so they couldn't get financing for the project they wanted to do. But so this has been the plan. And what will happen essentially at this point would be that one of the first parts of the transaction on closing day will be that the city will sign a deed to the EDA, and then it will be the EDA will have the property and will then enter into the leases, all of which are governed by the terms of the comprehensive agreement that the city has negotiated over the last couple of years. So it's not going to change any parts of the deal. It simply is going to be that the EDA holds them, enters into those leases, and then the properties will be developed going forward. There will be, the comprehensive agreement is a long, complex document, but we will have guarantees that will guarantee that the work will be done to provide the horizontal development and each of the vertical developments, that is each of the buildings as they go up. So once the EDA gets the property, those guarantees will be in place. And I believe that construction is going to start quickly. Right now, we have included in the proposal to transfer both D4, which is the condo parcel, and D2, which is the big 7.6 acre parcel. transfer both of those to the EDA. It may be that in the end, the city transfers the condo parcel, that is D4, directly to the fee condo owner. It doesn't go through the EDA, but in either case, it is that entire 8.6 acres that will be conveyed from the city's ownership to the EDA and ultimately to the condo owner, and then through ground leases to other developers of the rest of the site in order to accomplish this development. It's pretty exciting that we have such a big development all moving forward in one closing. And the only one piece will be left for a later closing. That's a senior living developer, but everything else is going to begin happening at the end of April, if all goes well. So I'm happy to answer more questions if there are specifics you want to know about. And I hope that wasn't too much or too little detail.
That was great. That was very helpful. Do any commissioners have questions? Mr. Stevens, hand it up.
I just have a comment. I have no problem in recommending that council approve this, but it kind of seems to me, given the MOU that's going to occur between the EDA and council, which pretty much gives 100% transparency to the role of city council on this, that it almost seems like the state code is maybe behind the times, and that maybe 40 years is something that should be considered modifying, unless there's something here that they had in mind that's not apparent. But if they did, it seems like it's so easy to get around it in terms of the role of the city council. But like I said, that's just commentary.
Well, the only thing that I suppose that is preserved to some degree is that the EDA has certain purposes for which it can hold facilities, facilities being the term. So they're fairly broad. So I think you might be right that it might be time to look at opening this up. But to the extent some property was held for a purpose other than what an EDA can do, you couldn't use this mechanism. But when you have new development coming in, this is the way it's often done.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Right. Plus, I think, depending if it's in the Constitution, I know that makes it,
Yeah.
might need to go to like a statewide ballot or something. I think in order to, like, the legislators can't just do
Right.
it themselves. They have to support it and then put it on the ballot. I guess it can happen. It does happen from time to time, but
Yeah.
extra, it's a much higher bar to get to. Mr. Puentes, go ahead.
Thank you. Just out of curiosity, you mentioned that it's a commonly used tactic. Is there a recent example of our EDA owning something like this? And
I don't know that we have done it so much. We have used, we have not, to my knowledge, and I am not as familiar with the history as some. I'm not sure the city has done it, but other localities have done it down in Tidewater and in like the Charlottesville area, where they've done sort of new development of a site. There's some, I know it because there's a few well-known cases about how you do financing, and those involve EDAs and IDAs, which for practical purposes are the same thing. But I'm not sure the city has actually done it. We have used our EDA to do some other things that the city itself can't do, but not, I think, just to hold property.
thank you for that. Is there any, does there need to be staff capacity at the EDA, or is there anything that they need to do that's different from this? Just wondering if there's any expertise that we don't have.
Will be, I think what will happen is this will be a joint effort with the city manager and his staff working with the EDA to help make this happen. And we will be working on a memorandum of understanding that can be entered into between the EDA and the city council so that we have some idea of moving forward how we are going to get there. We just haven't gotten that in shape at this point. We're in a crunch trying to get to April, but I expect that within a few weeks we should have that.
So, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Commissioner Weiss, go ahead.
Yeah, this is very helpful. Can you just explain the timing of this decision? Why now as opposed to earlier?
Well, it could have been done really at any time all the way along. I think we're doing it now because we really are winding up the closing. We will not transfer this property until at closing. As I said, it'll be one of the first actions during the closing. But I think partly we're sort of at we're reaching the critical point, but it probably could have come to you all earlier. But this is where we are now there's more certainty about moving forward. That's really all I have to say.
Okay, thank you. And that kind of gets at, what I was going to ask was, is there any risk or, what is the city protected in this, obviously, the EDA is somewhat, it's separate from the city, but it's a creature of the city. In that sense, I feel like our interests are protected, but is there any risk or that hasn't been accounted for?
I think that because this property is the subject of the comprehensive agreement, which is fairly detailed and has, requires that the property be handled in a certain way and in accordance with the zoning approvals, which we now have the special exception entitlement and the special exception site plan, that there isn't substantial risk because that is how the property will be moving forward at this time.
Okay.
So I think we would hope that we are also working cooperatively with the EDA, and if something should happen, that this property would come back to the city, obviously. Something happened in this project, not go forward, but.
Right. And that's right. The EDA, of course, it's separate, but not. In some ways, this is
right.
It's kind of a technical maneuver that needs to occur, based on the limits, in the Constitution, I suppose.
Yeah.
So, okay. Well, are there any other questions for city staff? Not seeing any other hands. So, all right. Well, based on the excellent summary and answers to our questions, I think we're ready for a motion on this. I know it's another piece in the puzzle here. I feel like there's been so many things that have come before us related to this project, beyond the, what we sort of expected initially to deal with. And it just, I think, speaks to the complexity of it. But we've made it this far, and it sounds like we're in the home stretch. So, nothing else. I'd look to the commission for a motion on this item.
Mr. Chair, I move that the Planning Commission recommend approval to City Council of TO 22-02 for conveyance of the 9.78 acre West Falls Church Economic Development Site to the Economic Development Authority so that the 99-year lease terms contemplated in the comprehensive agreement can be carried out.
Thank you, Mr.
I will second.
That's a second by Commissioner Teets. All right. Is there any discussion on that motion? If not, then Ms. Bazemore, a roll call vote, please.
Yep, Chair Krasner,
Yes.
Mr. Stevens,
Yes.
Ms. Teets,
Yes.
Mr. Fuentes,
Yes.
Ms. Weiss,
Yes.
Ms. Colmont,
Yes.
Mr. Hyra. Thank you.
Okay. Well, that motion passes, and now we're recommending that the city go ahead and convey the land. So good luck to City Council and the others involved in this aspect of the process. All right. Well, moving along on the agenda, our next scheduled item, which is item 6C, was supposed to be a public hearing on the subdivision application at 1001 Lincoln Avenue, but I understand that this item is being deferred. Is that correct, Mr. Stoddard? That's the recommendation? that we go?
Yeah, that is the staff recommendation. And if you're ready for it now or in a couple minutes, I'm ready I'm happy to give a brief summary of the status of the application as well as why staff is recommending that the public hearing be deferred to a later date.
No, I think now's the time. So
Sure. So this item, thank you, Chair, members of the commission. This is a subdivision application for 1001 Lincoln Avenue. It's the corner of Northwest and Lincoln Avenue, just north of the WNOD trail. And then this item was before you as a work session item at your previous meeting, which was the night of. Well, that's interesting. I'm not seeing the work session date.
February 2nd.
Yeah, thank you. There it is, February 2nd. And at that time, there were a number of questions raised regarding how stormwater would be handled. In addition to that, staff had asked some technical questions about showing the hookup to the sanitary sewer system, as well as requested revisions to the sidewalk layout. And staff had indicated to the applicant that a new set of submittal materials would be required for staff to make a positive recommendation. Staff is still waiting to receive those materials. And so at this time, without the materials to adequately review and make a full recommendation on, staff is recommending that the application be deferred to a date certain. And we would recommend, since we don't have the materials in hand, we would recommend deferring to April 6th. Deferring to a date certain has a couple benefits. One, it puts staff on a clock, and two, it keeps the neighborhood that may be tracking this item informed of when this would next come to the Planning Commission and their next opportunity to make public comment. And so that's staff's recommendation. I noticed the applicant is also on the call, but that wraps up my report.
Thank you, Mr. Stoddard. Okay, so I do see that Mr. Bean is here on behalf of the applicant. And so I guess my question would be, Mr. Bean, are you in agreement with staff's recommendation for a deferral?
Hi, Planning Commission. This is Adam Bean with Greenbuilt Homes. I do think we need some time to get details worked out with staff. We've had multiple conversations with Zach Bradley, the Director of Public Works. Zach has told us that DPW is aware that the city storm sewer system in the area is inadequate. And he's also informed us that there are plans to revise and redo the storm sewer in the area that we really think will eliminate the issues that are going on the lot. So we're excited to talk with Zach in more detail and his group in DPW and get to the bottom of what planned revisions are by the city. And we're hopeful that those planned revisions will eliminate the issues that Planning Commission has pointed out and neighbors, and it'll be a better situation for everyone involved and will allow the subdivision to be approved in the future. So that is our goal, to get to the details of the redesign of the storm sewer system in the area, and then report back to Planning Commission when we have the information we need, as well as have DPW explain to the Planning Commission what the plan is over there. I want to plant the seed that a possible idea that we're kicking around, and we want to put it towards the Planning Commission, is a possible conditional subdivision on this on the condition that the city does improve the existing stormwater sewer system on the site and possibly allow construction after that happens, or after a certain deadline has passed if the city hasn't yet done the improvements. Suggestion of maybe 12 months from approval of the subdivision. But we can get to those details in the future. Again, I appreciate the Planning Commission's consideration of our application. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Bean. Thank you for that. And I know there's been a lot of conversations going on in City Hall, so I hope that those can continue and some progress can be made on all of those fronts you mentioned. So, okay, so it sounds like you are in agreement with the deferral. Staff has recommended April 6th for a date certain. Unless any commissioners have any questions for staff or for Mr. Bean, If you, I see Mr. Stevens does. If not, I was going to say if not, then we'll go ahead and I'll look for a motion. But if you have a question, go right ahead, Mr. Stevens.
No, I didn't really have a question, but I just thought it would be worthwhile to reiterate that we have an interest in having someone from the city's stormwater engineering capacity join us. I guess it would be April 6th, just to be able to answer our questions fully. But I'm encouraged to hear that the discussions are ongoing to look at the infrastructure that supports this site, and hopefully all of that can get resolved successfully.
Okay, I agree. I'd heard over the years. I've heard discussions about some improvements to the existing infrastructure, and if those have advanced further, that would be good news. You're right, for everybody. So, all right. Well, looks like we're going to be deferring this. So, that's recommending April 6th. We have a motion to defer the public hearing on this item to a date certain of April 6th, 2022. Can someone go ahead and make a motion to that effect? Somebody, anybody? And the chair can make a motion. It's bad form though, but
I guess I can do it.
Okay.
I move that we defer. Are we deferring the hearing?
We're deferring the whole hearing. Yeah, we're not.
The hearing and final consideration, yeah.
Yeah. we're
Okay,
not-
I move. So I move that we defer the hearing and final consideration of the subdivision of 1001 Lincoln Avenue until April 6th. Is that
Thank you, Commissioner Comont. Do we have a second?
I can second.
Second by Mr. Stevens. Any discussion on the motion to defer? If not, then roll call vote, please, Ms. Bazemore.
Chair Krasner,
Yes?
Mr. Stevens,
Yes.
Ms. Teets,
Yes.
Mr. Puentes,
Yes.
Ms. Weiss,
Yes.
Ms. Colmont,
yes?
Mr. Hyra.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
That's 7-0. The subdivision application at 1001 Lincoln Avenue is deferred to a date certain of April 6th, 2022. Thank you, staff and applicant. All right, well, that brings us through, actually, I'm sorry, I was about to say we're done with our action items. We're not, because we have the February 2nd minutes. How could I forget those? Again, Ms. Bazemore's keeping us on our toes and keeping up to date with the minutes. So we have the February 2nd minutes for consideration. Any discussion, corrections, comments, revisions to those? And if not, then we will need a motion to adopt the February 2nd minutes.
Move to adopt the February 2nd minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Stevens.
I'll second.
Again by Ms. Teets. Any discussion on the motion? If not, then another roll call vote.
Chair Krasner,
Yes.
Mr. Stevens,
Yes.
Ms. Teets,
Yes.
Mr. Puentes,
Abstain.
Ms. Weiss,
Abstain.
Ms. Colmont,
Yes.
Mr. Hyra.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everybody. We are flying along tonight. I'm not going to be able to repeat this again, and we may now slow down, but we are flying. So we're up to item number 7, which takes us to our work session portion of the evening. We have one item for work session, and this is something we've heard before in various iterations. This is a work session on the special exception application for residential uses within a mixed-use development project, and to increase the building height with a bonus of 40 feet to a maximum height of 115 feet for a development project on approximately 4.63 acres of land located at 101, 191, and 201 West Broad Streets, and at 150 South Washington Street, and a parcel on South Maple Avenue. And these are real property numbers: 5230527, 52305-024, 52309-119, 52305-014, and 52309-116. This is an application by Atlantic Realty Companies Incorporated. So with that lengthy introduction, I believe Mr. Stoddard and Ms. Ruzzi are here to give us a staff update and report on this item.
Sure. Thank you very much, Chair. So just to briefly introduce the item before I turn it over to staff, as well as to maybe suggest some staging for your all's work session tonight. So this item is before you again. Great timing by the applicant. So this item is before you again as a work session item. And if I could direct your attention actually to the timing section, Ms. Bazemore, if we can jump down to line 236. Just to give you all a sense of where you are in the process, this item is before you for your final work session, your final scheduled work session here on February 16th, in advance of your formal recommendation to council at your next regular meeting, March 2nd. Of course, the applicant has been busy engaging the community over the last 2 months. As you may remember, at your meeting on January 5th, you all held a work session to receive a presentation from the applicant. It was a very detailed presentation, and of course, boards and commissions were invited to send a rep to receive the same presentation. Applicant has since been engaging with all those boards and commissions over the last 2 months. And of course, that wasn't the beginning of the engagement process. It actually started when the applicant filed back in February of 2021. So we've now passed the 1-year mark in considering the application. So that's sort of a long way of saying that your process tonight is to hold your final work session in advance of your recommendation to council. If we jump back up all the way to the request section there on line 5, I should probably turn it over to the case planner at some point so that I don't take her whole presentation. But largely there have been no changes in the material since you saw it last. And so what I would suggest for your work session tonight is rather than receive a duplicate of the presentation, instead, maybe after the staff report, if you all were interested in maybe a summary, or you could jump straight into the Q&A. But with that, I'll turn it over to Akita Ruzzi, our case planner on the project.
Thanks, Paul. Good evening. This is Akita. The staff report and the application materials before the commission this evening, as Paul said, have not changed since the January 5th work session. Staff and the applicant gave a pretty comprehensive presentation at that meeting. So in the interest of time, I'll just provide a very quick summary of the project and schedule for tonight. The developers team is on the call and is ready to respond to questions and comments during the commission's discussion later on. So for the staff report, the application before you is for a new mixed-use development proposal at the intersection of West Broad Street and South Maple. Page 5 of the report provides a summary of the project. The overall proposed development site entails 5 parcels, including 150 South Washington, 101, 191, and 201 West Broad Streets, and a small vacant parcel at the corner of South Maple and West Broad. The proposed project includes a new mixed-use building as well as improvements to existing office buildings at George Mason Square and 150 South Washington Street. As proposed, the new mixed-use building includes ground floor retail, grocery use on ground floor at the corner of Maple and Broad, upper level office use of approximately 33,000 square feet, 6 levels of residential use with 246 units above ground floor retail and office, and a structured parking garage. Proposed upgrades to existing buildings as part of the project include facade and ground floor improvements to George Mason Square buildings and upgrades to courtyards and plazas around these existing buildings. The land use applications on line 91 include special exceptions to allow residential use within a mixed-use development and to increase in building height from a maximum of 75 feet in the existing B2 zoning to a maximum of 115 feet. In terms of application status, the application was initially filed in February of 2021. Council held several work sessions since then to review the application. A second submission of the application was received on June 24. On December 13th, City Council referred the application to boards and commissions. Since that referral, the applicant has been engaged with boards and commissions and has been soliciting public feedback. Once the boards and commission review period concludes in early March, all boards and commission comments will be presented to City Council for their consideration at a work session. Following that, the applicant plans to submit a revised application packet that responds to all city comments to date, including staff and boards and commission comments. The Planning Commission held a work session on January 5th and provided comments related to retail occupancy, housing, and affordability. Those comments are provided on page 3 of the Planning Commission staff report. As Paul just said, the commission is scheduled to take action on the application on March 2nd. We are requesting commission's feedback on the application this evening in advance of that action hearing. Tentative date for final consideration by City Council is scheduled for early May. With that, that concludes my staff report. I think the applicant does have some opening remarks, and then we have the same deck of slides from the January 5th meeting with some minor updates ready to refer to for questions and discussions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Ruzzi. I guess at this point, yeah, we'll turn it over. I guess Mr. Painter is here. I mean, one thing I would just say, for the applicant's benefit, and I think it's similar to how we as a commission dealt or handled the Founders Road 2 case. I think we would be looking for between this work session and the public hearing on this with us, some type of submission that, at least in a conceptual way, indicates the direction that the applicant team is looking to go to respond to all the comments, so that we have a better handle on which comments have been addressed or incorporated into any future revisions. Understanding that a full submission package comes after our recommendation. So with that kind of as an opening, I guess I can turn it over to Mr. Painter to give us an update and presentation from the applicant.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I do have a slide deck. It's as Mr. Ruzzi said, it was pretty much the same slide deck that you all had seen. We have been spending, and I don't need to go back over it, but we have been spending the last month and a half or so meeting with various boards and commissions. I would say that the feedback that we received thus far has been fairly positive. There are concerns, if I'm being completely honest with everybody. So some of the issues that have come up include just ensuring, I'll just go through a couple of them, ensuring tenant protection for the existing tenants of George Mason Square, especially in terms of what the temporary parking situation is going to look like. We're not really displacing any tenants, but clearly, the parking garage is going to be removed. It'll be rebuilt, and people need to park somewhere. So we have a draft temporary parking plan that we have included with our submission materials, and we will be looking to review that going forward. Another issue that arose was the importance of short-term drop-off areas for Uber, for Lyft, where box trucks are going to come for deliveries, and where those spaces are going to be located in the parking garage, to make sure that they're not out on the street. Obviously, curbside utilization is controlled by the city and is monitored by parking enforcement and the city police. But what can we do on the interior of our property to encourage those types of uses, to encourage, to load and pick up and drop off people entirely on our site? The number of electric vehicle charging stations has come up a couple of times, and the question really is, right now we're at 5%, and with 5%, that generates about 44 electric vehicle charging stations, which I believe is more than all of the other mixed-use special exceptions and recent rezonings that have been approved have committed to in aggregate. So obviously we're very happy with where we are on that. but taking a look at trying to future-proof the building as well. So those things are under discussion. We received just a couple of comments about the planned Hawk pedestrian signal that is proposed mid-block between Maple and South Washington Street. There were questions about the timing of that signal, whether it would work with the traffic, the traffic lights at Maple and South Washington, and whether it would just, stop traffic entirely. And so, we've looked at that from a transportation perspective. I know the city has as well. And just to confirm, that signal will stop traffic. It'll be pedestrian actuated, but it won't stop traffic every single time somebody pushes a button. It'll be timed with the adjacent two signals. But we do believe that's an important feature of the project and important for all of downtown. Lots of questions about the traffic circle at Maple and West Annandale near the bowling alley. And, we've said this multiple times, but that is not a part of this application. This is something that the city has under consideration. People seem to be concerned. Some people really like the traffic circle. Some people really prefer a typical four-legged intersection. But this project has agreed to provide the right-of-way for either eventuality, whichever is selected. We have assisted the city with the engineering of that. We've also assisted them with the engineering of trying to, make the interior circle smaller so that there is a through bike lane inside the traffic circle. And then we've also been tasked or challenged by some to take a look at the landscaping we have in the city center park to make sure that, sight distance and things like that, at least on our property, is not inhibited by landscaping. There were multiple questions about the landscaping and open space features of the property, of the project. There were questions about the LEED level that we are pursuing, which is LEED Gold. We had our environmental consultant available to answer questions during the Environmental Sustainability Council's meeting. And we're happy to have her return as well, just to march through kind of what we anticipate. I cannot pretend to speak, to be an expert on that as far as what a LEED scorecard might look like and things like that. But this will be a LEED Gold building, which aside from Founders Row 2, which is being proposed, Insights Broad and Washington project, and then all of the buildings at the economic development site at the high school site, every other project has been LEED Silver. The other three that I mentioned are LEED Gold, and that seems to be where the standard is headed. There were questions also about garage design, about the functionality of the garage, how it would work. The location of it, whether it's going to be shielded from public rights of way, especially as it relates to the Winter Hill community, whether it sits proud of the existing George Mason Square, which it does. And so we've walked through the functionality of that multiple times, and it seems to be acceptable to many people, but there are concerns just about the exterior facade, especially along South Washington Street. Lots of questions about the grocery store. Now, I would say of all of the issues that have come up, a plurality of them, and it's not every meeting, but there have been many questions raised about why a grocery store is being proposed versus some other use at the intersection of Maple and Broad. We provided, I think, responses at the last meeting of that, but again, we're excited about the grocery store. It'll be a new entrant to the city. And it does not result in a precipitous drop in revenue relative to the other grocery stores in the city. And then last but not least, height has been an issue. We are requesting a special exception for height. There's a variety of reasons as to why, but we are happy with what we've proposed in terms of height and sort of stand behind that. But those are several of the issues that have come up as we've walked through things. As Mrs. Ruzzi said, I think our task at this point in time is, we still have a few meetings left to go, but our task is then going to be to consolidate all of those comments that we received and then respond to them after the boards and commissions process is over. So we have a lot on our plate to sort of tackle, but that is what I hope to be sort of an honest assessment of the issues that have come up through the various boards and commissions. So with that, there's one other thing too. And that's the housing thing. So we are obviously in line with the city's adopted affordable housing policy. of a minimum of 6%, and then we have proposed to increase that to above 10%, about 10.16 affordability based on the number of units in the building. And there's been, a lot of people, the Housing Commission appreciated that. There have been questions about whether or not it's possible to not, not have a credit against the other voluntary concession dollars, but that's simply not the way that it works, at least for this project. So those are the issues that have come up thus far. There are many others, obviously, but those seem to be the ones that continue to rise to the top, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Painter. I guess at this point we'll open it up to commissioners if they have questions. I mean, I know we laid on a lot of questions and concerns and comments back in January, but I think this is a time to reiterate things and as we get closer to the public hearing. I think Commissioner Hyra's hand, he was first out of the gate, so why don't you go ahead, Mr. Hyra.
All right, thank you. Mr. Painter, thanks for reviewing many of the concerns that people in the community have had. Last time you came before us, I talked to the issue of affordable housing, and I think part of my concern was more with our city staff and trying to get a better handle and understanding whether we were interested as a city in terms of taking some of the units on site versus the in lieu cash contribution. I think that there has been a little bit more of a consensus around that. And I just wanted to highlight an issue that relates to the potential cash contribution. I think it is for the 10 one-bedrooms, is that, I've been able to go to the Housing Commission meetings, and, there's a real sense that Virginia Village which is not exactly adjacent to this site, but is very close by. It is some naturally occurring affordable housing that we have in the city. Our city has bought some of the units, I think 5 there, and the idea is to preserve the affordable housing. We know with this development, if the special exception is given by us as the Planning Commission and the city for just the density increase, it'll increase the value of the property that you would like to develop. We know if you bring the development dollars and do and execute on everything that you've talked about, which I think is a very ambitious plan that would really diversify our city and bring a lot of vitality to an important corner, but it will also put at risk our affordable housing, which is located nearby. So since the meeting we talked, I think I elevated this last meeting, and one thing that you didn't talk about, but now has come to a light, is that your company that you're representing also owns a couple of the units at Virginia Village. And I think that we would like to work with Atlantic to figure out a way to preserve the affordable housing, and maybe using some of the cash contribution or other funds that the city has available, such as Amazon funds that have come in from the state, and also other funds that may come in from the $2 billion Amazon Housing Equity Fund, to preserve more of the affordable housing where you guys, or Atlantic, owns some units. And I know there's been some discussions about whether those units would be on the table or whether you'd be willing to work with the city to maybe sell those units or preserve them as affordable housing. And my understanding is that Atlantic is pushing back on that. And I find that troubling because we want to do multiple things in the city. We want to bring development, but we want to have equitable development that doesn't displace and put low-income people or moderate-income people at jeopardy because of the developments that we're doing. And knowing that your company or the company you're representing owns units there and is unwilling at this point to even get to the table to discuss what may happen to those units is troubling. And I would hope that as this moves forward and further discussion happens among us at the Planning Commission, but also at the city level with the council, that you ask, and I'm asking you to go back to who you're representing and ask them to think more deeply about those units and how much the preservation of those units by Atlantic is important, because I think if you get this development deal done that we're talking about now, there's a tremendous amount of profit to be made. And I'm having a hard time understanding why 3 units or 2 to 3 units is something that seems to be a little bit of a sticking point that is non-negotiable, because in part the reason that the city is asking for a contribution as opposed to the units in this development is to preserve the units that are at Virginia Village. So I would love if you have any information on the units that are owned or any more information about the willingness of Atlantic to bring potentially those units to the table as we discuss a development that, if it happens, will really affect the price point of those units. I would greatly appreciate that. And I would love to also get on public record how many units Atlantic owns at Virginia Village.
Should I respond to that, Mr. Chairman?
Sure. Yeah, sure, Mr. Painter, go ahead.
So, just to get it on the record, Atlantic owns 3 units at Virginia Village. We are meeting, again, the city's established affordable living policy of a minimum of 6% affordable plus the additional 10 one-bedroom units. We have made it very clear, though, from the beginning of the project that we are not interested in commingling a discussion about the quads with this project. You may not know this, but we did meet with the city to learn about its Virginia Village acquisitions. We are interested in maintaining them as market affordable, and I think what you can look at is what we have done as an organization. And if we ever think about redevelopment, we'd be happy to discuss those options with the city. I would also say, too, that Atlantic has been a good owner of these 3 quads. It manages these 3 quads themselves. It purchased them in 2008. They are stabilized assets. They are well maintained. There are no health code issues. So this is not a situation as other affordable, market affordable places might be in the city. And what's also a little bit interesting is that Atlantic has not raised the rents once since it purchased them in 2008. They have no intent to do so, even post-construction. And the rents, just to let you know, are $800 per month per unit, which is equivalent to 45% AMI, which also is lower than the rents that the city itself charges for its own quads. In terms of the change in property values, assessed values, I understand that this is more of a city-wide issue. If you take a look at the assessed values, which you may have done for any of the quads, but also citywide, I think that you will see a major differentiation in assessed values over the past 21 years. So, for example, when Pearson Square opened up, which is immediately adjacent to the quads that the city now owns, where the tax analyst buildings are, there was a 0.4% increase that year when it increased. They went down during the Great Recession. They held steady during 2012, 2013, 2014. When the Harris Teeter opened up in 2016, they increased by 2%. And this year, they have actually decreased in assessed value. So I'm not sure that there's a direct correlation between new development, such as the Harris Teeter or the Pearson Square project or the Target, which is much more proximate to these than this project will be, versus it being a larger citywide issue. But I did want you to understand or know that the rents that we have charged, again, are at 40%, 45% AMI. They are well maintained, and they're not having to be maintained or managed by the city. But Mr. Schulman, Adam Schulman, who's my client, may be here as well and may want to chime in on this too.
I am, and Andrew, I appreciate everything that you said, and I echo those statements very strongly. Those are assets that we have held for a number of years, and to be perfectly honest, that we've held them and maintained them for good reason. We've had plenty of opportunities to increase rents, make changes to those units, but it hasn't been a decision that we wanted to do. We want to keep them the way they are. And quite honestly, as Andrew mentioned, I feel that they're units that are better maintained than most of the units in that vicinity right there, and at the lowest rents that are there as far as I'm aware. But to have them somehow feel that they need to be linked to our current project, I find to be unfair. And I don't find to serve the purpose that perhaps you're looking to accomplish. I feel that the affordable housing that we're providing in our project, number one, I feel is more than sufficient. And number two, if we want to have more discussions about the affordable housing in the new development that we're talking about constructing, then we can have that discussion. But in no way are we willing to commingle these three assets that we've held for 14 years at good condition, and we've taken, in my opinion, good care of our tenants and have not increased rents, as opposed to what other owners of property have done, including the city in that area.
And might I also add one other thing, Adam? Without divulging too much information, we do work with nonprofits to identify people to locate in that building, as far as our tenants as well. So we have ongoing relationships with them that go back over a decade. So when we talk about Atlantic being serious about helping the city with its housing affordability issues, I think the proof is what it has done.
Can I, Mr. Chairman, can I just react and I'll keep it brief.
Sure.
Can I just respond?
Sure, Mr. Harper.
Mr. Schulman, I mean, I appreciate, hearing more of the context of the care and the length that you have owned the units at Virginia Village. But at the same time, it's about the future, right? It's not necessarily about the past. And so our actions related to your development, One City Center, affects, and Mr. Painter, I have to disagree with you to some extent about adjacent properties and how they're developed and how they affect. I mean, we at the city, and I'm sure you know this, we do small area plans because we know an area is going to be affected by any particular development. So it may affect it in different ways, and we can argue about that. But to say that One City Center will not affect Virginia Village in any meaningful way, that's probably an invalid assumption. But again, what I really want to get on the table here, it's about the future. It's about the development that we are proposing and talking about now at One City Center and how it may affect a nearby property. And Mr. Schulman, I would say that what we're asking you to do is to at least enter into a conversation about a future plan that the city has a vision for to preserve affordable housing. And it is related to your project. So whether you want to commingle these or not, they are linked. Also, the fact that the affordable housing funds that will come from your project, the city is thinking about doing further development to preserve affordable housing at Virginia Village with. So I know you may not want to mingle these two together, but they are already mingled in the way that the city is thinking about doing future development and preserving affordable housing. So for you to say that they're not on the table, it's not, then I mean, that's an odd thing to say, because I think your interests and the city's interests are aligned, and you would want to align them as best as possible. And when you say that you do not want to put those units on the table at all, you're misaligning your interest in the city's interest. And I would say if you have a huge development going forward worth millions and millions of dollars, and another thing that's worth a lot less, maybe the quads, maybe they're 900,000, so you got three of them. It doesn't make sense to me personally, but maybe I'm just off here. But I would think entering a discussion about long-term planning and how your project, which is providing affordable housing, which is great, can help preserve nearby affordable housing, as well as have some units in your building, I think is a worthy conversation. And I also understand that this is, not my agenda. This is a city agenda. This is multiple members of the council, the housing commission, and the housing staff who have thought deeply about this. So I'm surprised that you said, well, we'll further talk, because what I've heard is they've asked you, and you've repeated what you just said here tonight, that it's not on the table. So that's interesting. So why would we provide a bonus density for you then? Why would we want to go forward with a plan that could potentially harm our affordable housing? So I would think we could do equitable growth, which is bring growth, bring development, and do preservation. But it sounds like that's not what you're interested in.
Mr. Acre, can I just clarify something? You had said that it's the city's interest. Can you just clarify exactly what the city's interests are and what the formal adopted position of the city is on this, please? Just so that we get that on the record too, so I can understand.
Okay, well, sure. I mean, I wouldn't say there's an adopted policy, but there is an affordable housing trust fund, which when development occurs in the city, we sometimes ask for units in the developments or a contribution to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. The Affordable Housing Trust Fund is using some of its funds to preserve affordable housing and buy up units at Virginia Village. So the city is applying for funds from Amazon, which are state funds, to also get even more money in to buy up more of the quads, in the hope to have enough of the quads that a development plan can go forward with preserving those units and preserving them as affordable. So this is not secretive. I mean, this is public. So, you know, when you're asking me to state a city position, I mean, if you're just following the Affordable Housing Trust Fund's activity and the Housing Commission's activity, and also the city's housing office, this would be pretty clear. But maybe you guys haven't really followed that.
No, I'm sorry. I should have. I thought I heard something different, which was it was the city wanted us to have these units incorporated into this project. That's what I'm sorry. I thought that's what you were saying.
I will say that as well. That you know that last time you came before the Planning Commission, I had said to the city staff, it seems that there is not consensus, that there were some people that were saying, let's have the maximum number of units. So the 10% units, let's have them all in one city center. But then there was another group of people who said, oh, no, let's take half the number of units and let's get some funds that will go into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. And I got an understanding of the reason that was proposed was to enhance the amount of funding that was available to maybe pair up with the Amazon money to make a deeper impact, because there are multiple quads over there at Virginia Village. So I would say that in part of this discussion is to have the money the units not go completely into one city center. It's to take a cash contribution to think deeply about what can happen and what can go forward at Virginia Village. So there's no written policy on that there's nothing that says in your development agreement that the 1.5 million will instantly go into Virginia Village, but it will be a decision that affordable housing fund makes. And I've met with that group. I'm now a part of that group, and they are interested in using some of that money potentially for Virginia Village.
Okay, yeah, I'm sorry. I was just trying to make the link between what I thought you had said earlier, which was, and I'm sorry to be, dense about this, but about, the city wants us to include these units in our community benefit package, and have a discussion about including these units in our community benefit package.
I think there is people that are affordable housing advocates who are part of the Housing Commission and the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, also part of city staff, also city council members who are interested in having a discussion with Atlantic about the units that are in Virginia Village that Atlantic owns. I think I hope I've made that clear. And I would hope that before you go before the council.
I believe sorry.
No, go ahead.
I just wanted to, and I think you may know this, but in the event that you don't, I just want to make it clear. We've had numerous discussions with the city on this, not just now. It's been over the years. There have been discussions that have been had, and I'm happy to have more discussions with the city. There's no way that I've ever said under any topic that I'm not willing to come to the table. When the city calls, I come. Now, that does not mean that at the same time that I'm necessarily willing to include these three homes into the mix, and maybe that's effectively what you're saying. And I continue to remain committed to talking to the city as we go forward. But as far as including these 3 homes on Gibson Street, I'm calling them 3 homes, even though there's 9 residences in there. Or I'm sorry, 13. As far as including them in our development at One City Center, that at this time I is not something that I consider as viable. But I am happy to have and continue to commit to having further discussions with the city. That's something that I will always be willing to do.
Yeah, and I think, sorry to, monopolize the time. I'm sure other planning commissioners have other comments, but I do want to get this one on the table because, time is short. And, we'd love to see One City Center approved. But, Andrew, I would say that, yeah, coming to the table, of course, there are multiple companies that have already laid out plans for Virginia Village. And obviously, Virginia Village, the bowling alley at one time, there are, and I'm sure your company has sketched out redevelopment plans for that area. But, everything is changing, right? The bowling alley and its ownership has changed. I think plans for that have changed. Also, the fact that the city hadn't owned units at Virginia Village and now owns units there. This development that, your development now is part of putting redevelopment pressures on that area. So to come back to the table and say, hey, we should really be planning together how to preserve this, because the city only owns 5 units. You guys only own 3 units. There are many other units there. And also that's not enough to really flesh out a true plan. But obviously everything that the city does, it's usually going to be a private-public partnership. And I think that there would be an appreciation for you coming to the table, not necessarily giving up the units and tying them to One City Center, but at least to have an idea of, if you cut a $1.5 million check related to City Center, and the city may tell you, well, here's what we want to do with it. And we want to buy this, this, and this at Virginia Village. And for you to sort of say, oh, we got these 3 units here. How can we maybe put them together to really do some planning? I think would be greatly appreciated. And from what I've heard, and again, I don't know exactly how these conversations have gone, but it's been more of the line of people have mentioned this to you and you've kind of said, well, no, they're off the table. We're not talking about that. And I would just see that as a missed opportunity.
And I would disagree with it, and just in the fact that anytime a conversation has been requested, regardless of who it's been, we have always been willing and will continue to be willing to have discussions. That's without question. I'm looking out for the best interest in the city, at the same time looking out for what I see as a vision for that area. And though I'm happy to have continued discussions and want the best for the city, I don't see it as part of the One City Center application. And I understand what you're saying. That's just my vision.
Yeah, and I understand what you're saying too. But just on the last thing I'll say, and I will stop, is that the check or the splitting up of the units, that it will be part units in the development and part funds that will go. The city is thinking about using those funds towards Virginia Village. So I don't know if that was directly communicated with you, but I just wanted you to understand there's a rationale and reason and a plan now in place, or at least really being discussed, related to why taking half the units at the development and taking half of the money as a contribution. And that contribution, I'm not saying it will definitely go, but there is thoughts about having it go towards Virginia Village. So in the city's idea, these 2 areas are commingled.
Okay.
Thank you. I really appreciate the time and thank you for coming here tonight and discussing this important issue with us.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Howard. I'm hearing, perhaps, again, a separate conversation needs to occur that is perhaps tangentially related, but sort of separate from the crux of what we're discussing with this project. I certainly understand, spatially and some of the some of the other effects of redevelopment on this corner in the surrounding area. But for the purposes of our discussion, I think we should focus on what we can get from this development on site, or in cash in lieu, and focus on that. It doesn't mean that at the same time there can't be a parallel discussion on this other issue over at Virginia Village, and sounds like there may be two they're not so far apart as far as overall objective, but again, perhaps two slightly separate discussions, but certainly part of the bigger picture for affordable housing in the city, which is something we struggle with on every project. So I certainly understand where Mr. Hire is coming from, looking at every opportunity we can get to improve the situation as far as that goes here in the city. Okay, well, moving on from that topic, I don't know if we're going to resolve that tonight. Do any other commissioners have comments? I see other hands up. I think Ms. Teets was next, and she's been very patient. So go ahead.
Yeah, I think I forgot what I was going to say, but wait a minute. I can pull it together. I think I've actually seen more work session versions of this than most everyone. Maybe Tim might have seen more because I'm the rep for CACT, so I saw theirs. I saw Rex and Parks on the VPIS board, so I saw the VPIS one. I've seen all the ones that we've done. So it's just like an overwhelming amalgam of images and things I've heard. But the one thing I have noticed throughout all of them is no real substantial changes. I've heard lots of different comments and lots of different issues that people had, and a lot of them I agree with. There's not enough green space. That little bits of green roof don't really mean that much to me. I've seen the map with the little pieces of green, but they're almost all on top of roofs or inside different areas. I think the buildings are too tall. They don't really fit with George Mason Square because of such a height differential, and it's not cohesive. I kind of look at the sketches. When you guys sketch things, it usually looks really good, and sometimes when we actually get it, it's not always as good as the sketches. So I kind of feel like right now I'm looking at the sketches and it just doesn't look cohesive to me. We want some differences in the architecture, obviously, because we don't want it monolithic. But as you wrap around that whole block, there's some really odd connections. There's parts of it that kind of look like steampunk Victorian to me a little bit with the kind of, but it's just the way the sketches are. Maybe the metal, overlay on George Mason Square kind of looks weird. Back at the parking deck, I guess, is that vegetation back there, but it's dark. Is the vegetation going to grow on that side? Is that, I'm talking about the drive aisle to the garage that has like kind of the fuzzy looking thing that's on the sketches that I'm assuming is some kind of vegetation or fake vegetation. I look at it and I look at the sketches and I looked at them for about an hour the other day and I just don't feel like it's a cohesive project. And I've heard that from other people. I've heard from a lot of people that it's too tall. There's no step backs. I recognize that because you're not right next to residential like some of these other projects that you don't feel like you need to do the step backs. But I would say that if you look at the Rushmark building, where the Harris Teeter is, West Broad, that is pulled back from the corner on that one side, which kind of makes the building less overshadowing of the pedestrian walkways and across the street. It doesn't seem so big. And if you look at Broad and Washington's plans, they're totally pulled back from that corner. They have a big pullback in the back. They have a big green area. West Broad has a little green area on the side, a little walkway and things. And they, originally those buildings were much further out. And they have those big decks now because they really pulled it in for us. Not just next to the residential, but also off of Broad Street. I just haven't seen any of that kind of give and take with you guys. I haven't seen any maybe we could do a little bit. I think the corner of Maple and Broad, that big glass, at least in the sketch, it looks pretty horrendous to me. I just don't see how that fits into the downtown. I'm really concerned about how it looks. I really feel like it could be pulled back a little bit. But that's what I've been hearing from people is very little green space. I know we're getting that little park across the street, but if you give that to us, then it's our park, not part of the project. So I'm not sure how that's not really green space in the project. It's too tall. It's not cohesive. I have heard the grocery store thing, but I know that that's not a problem. Our Harris Teeter's packed. The Giant is packed. The Aldi is packed. Even BJ's on the edge of the city is packed. There is, most people like myself, I buy most of my groceries outside the city. because we have food allergies in my family and I have to go to Whole Foods and things like that. So when we get to Whole Foods, I'll finally buy food in the city. But I'm sure there's other people that are buying outside the city because their niche grocery store isn't here. So I'm not worried about that so much. But mostly what I'm mostly concerned about is where are the changes? Where is some, not one group that I saw this with didn't have some suggestions, some thoughts, some issues. And that's what I ask you. Can you tell me what are the changes? Have you changed anything substantial in all of these work sessions?
So, Ms. Teets, so yeah, we have made changes. In fact, I think Ms. Ruzzi probably knows we submitted, a couple of memos that show the changes that were made between I think it was probably between the first attempt at the first reading and the second attempt.
I did see that, but I mean in the more recent cycle.
Well, no, we haven't made, no. There have been no changes since this was referred out to boards and commissions because we're in the process of taking back the feedback. And
I would just say that normally when it goes out to boards and commissions and you guys start rolling through those, when you come back to us, you'll say, hey, we're hearing this and this, and we're looking at some things. And I didn't hear that either, that we're even looking at anything. So I would like to see, I guess the reason I'm concerned is it's coming to us now. Our next meeting is an action. As it is right now, I just don't think you're reflecting any of the comments that I'm hearing, that I've been hearing for a long time. And I personally can't support the project as it is. Not from what I'm hearing from neighbors and the letters I've been receiving and the calls I've been receiving. So you guys you're not connecting to the people. That's all I can say. And I don't want to take any more time because I know there's other hands up.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure how to respond. When it comes to the architecture, we had a very good session with the Architectural Advisory Board. We've had a lot of favorable comments. There have been questions about the things that I had mentioned about the height and about the grocery store and the garage design. You've listened to the various multiple times that we've had discussions about the justification of the height. As far as the landscaping, we've calculated those out relative to the other mixed-use projects, and ours is right at the top. In the park design, we've had multiple conversations about too. But no, we have not. You are correct. We have not made any substantive changes since this was referred out. I would not characterize, at least the feedback that we've heard in the boards and commissions over the last month and a half, as being solely negative at all. In fact, we've had many thank yous and many appreciative comments, including about the architecture and how excited people are. But I think your point is taken, and I think when we come back to you in March, we will certainly, as Chair Krasner said, let you know what we're evaluating and what we're working towards. But I appreciate your feedback on that.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Puentes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you to my commissioners. It's been a great conversation so far. And I do want to associate myself with Mr. Hyra's comments. I thought that's, I had a whole bunch of things here I wanted to talk about with affordable housing, but that's you really got to the crux of my concerns here. Just would like to see just something more creative, more flexibility, something that leverages all these opportunities. Again, Mr. Hyra, that discussion was much more articulate than I can bring it, but that's number one comment there. Because I do like this project. I do want to support it. I like the messiness of it. That's my term. I think that the way that it's come together, there's a nice cityness to this that I think is great and appropriate for a part of the city that does need it. So I do appreciate that part. It gets to one of the other concerns is about the parking. It feels like so much parking for this project. I've seen everybody from the EDA to VPAS wondering why there is so much parking. I'd love to see it if you could bring that down some. I know you've chopped a floor off the parking garage to bring this down a little bit further, but again, if we make it very easy to park, that's what people are going to do. And I'd love to see what you could get done, with whatever you think you can get to make this project work, without having to meet all the requirements that we have. Just a couple more transportation related things. I do think the Hawk signals are great. I strongly support those. It's an area that does need that kind of with all these people and activity, it's going to need some life and vitality, but we're going to need that kind of safety measures there. There is I mean, we talk about this later, but as you think through where those go and how they're operating, the bus routes that are there, they're changing the bus routes a little bit. I want to make sure that those buses are still operating the way they're supposed to. It comes down Route 7 to the east and then makes a left onto 29. That needs to be factored in at some point. We can get to that later. And then I know there's a lot of comments on the roundabout. I strongly support that as well. I know it's not really part of this here, but again, just for the record, I know folks are concerned about safety. Roundabouts, there's tons and tons and tons of studies that show that they're much, much safer. It's easier for pedestrians to cross. There's smaller streets to get around. It reduces and eliminates a lot of the most dangerous type of collisions. I've seen stats that say 75% decreases when you switch from intersections to roundabouts. So, I really want to see that part go through. There's also studies that show that when these are first proposed, that people hate the idea. 80% of people don't like roundabouts being proposed. When they come in and people use them, that 80% switches to 80% in favor. So I would like to see that continue. But again, the main thing I wanted to focus on was the affordable housing comments we talked about earlier. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Krasner, may I respond to a couple of those?
Sure. Absolutely, go ahead.
With respect to the hawk signal, we obviously agree with that. In terms of the parking, that has been an issue that it's a needle that we've had to thread, and it has not been an easy discussion because, in one sense, as you had mentioned, we don't want to do anything that jeopardizes leasing for the retail, office, and residential in the project. On the other hand, we do not want to build so much parking that we are incentivizing people single occupancy trips from this site. We have committed to a demand management plan. We have increased our parking reduction request from 11.3% to, I think, over 20%, if I'm not mistaken, Maria Lashinger from Grove Slade. And then we've also had to address how much public parking, we are providing a minimum of 30 public parking spaces free of charge. And so we've heard these discussions back and forth about, we've heard okay, this is the one area in the downtown that can have a large parking garage. And so that when the area that's, around the bowling alley site eventually redevelops, and not just the bowling alley, but, the other parking lots that are around it and other buildings redevelop, they may not be able to provide sufficient parking on site. And so they could use this garage, much like the area that's by Q Records and Dogwood might be able to rely on the Kaiser garage or the new Broad Washington garage across the street. So it's kind of been a tricky one because, in one sense we hear the issue about not providing enough parking, and then there's too much parking. So we're trying to find a way to address the parking needs of this project plus the public parking. And then also this serves as the parking for the existing George Mason Square complex and the 150 South Washington complex. So your point is well taken. Maria, I don't know if you want to talk at all about, if you have anything else to add at this juncture about the parking and the ratios and the transportation management program that we're planning to reduce the amount of, again, single occupancy vehicles exiting and entering the site.
Thanks, Andrew. Maria Lashinger with Grove Slade. Andrew, actually, I think you hit all the high points. It is the shared parking reduction. The percent is 20.4% is what we have increased that reduction request to. We have a very robust TDM plan to do just that, deter single occupant vehicles going to and from the site. But I think you hit all the high points there.
But and then on Maria, and I don't know who's the right design team expert on this one, but Maria or Pete Crawford, the commissioner had raised the issue, I believe, of the bus rapid transit system that's supposed to go past the site, if I'm not mistaken. And I think that we had looked at where that is to occur, and I think it is immediately to the west of the site, but I also thought it was on, I can't recall if that was, where the drop-off station was, because the bus has to transition over to take the left, so it's not exactly on this site, or where it is.
Correct. There's two separate pieces. There's the bus rapid transit, and yes, the planned stop is across the street from us, not along the site frontage here for One City Center. But then there are also the proposed changes to the existing bus routes, the buses that head up to the metro. And we have taken those into account. We've had conversations with city staff about those changes and how it'll specifically, it won't necessarily affect service to the site, but it will affect the potential for an increased utilization of the bus shelters and the bus stop near the site. So the routes, for all intents and purposes, will serve the site in a similar manner that it does today, but potentially relocating folks from other bus stops to the stops along the site frontage. So we have had conversations and we are taking that into account.
Mr. Barones, I don't know if that answers the issue or it addressed the issue that you had brought up, but.
Thank you.
All right, let's see. Thank you for that. I think Ms. Comont, go ahead.
Hello, thank you for coming and presenting this to us tonight. I want to echo a couple comments from both Ms. Teets and Mr. Puentes. I also share Ms. Teets' concerns about the height and the lack of green space. I think that if the park is meant to be counted as green space for this project, it should be maintained by the developer, even if it is being given to the city. Otherwise, it just doesn't seem right. I also am still concerned, like Mr. Puentes is, that we have too much parking here. I do understand the reasons why that is, and I hear you that you're getting some mixed messages on that. And but I would be on the side of reducing it. I think the garage is very prominent, and I'm concerned about the attractiveness of that structure on South Washington Street. And like Ms. Teets, you know, I'm a little conflicted about the cohesiveness of the project. I agree with her that it doesn't feel very cohesive. I also kind of agree with Mr. Puentes that it makes it a little city-like, but that makes me wonder, is that appropriate for Falls Church? Does that feel like a Falls Church building? It's a lot of glass. So I'm unsure about that. I want to mention that the CACT actually put together a really great letter with recommendations for steps that the city can take to create real bicycle infrastructure. I think the thing that's unique about Falls Church is that it's so small. We're only 2 square miles. We really have an opportunity to build a walkable and bikeable community. And I think the CACT is really pushing to make that happen. One of the recommendations in their letter talks about the importance of the Annandale and Maple intersection. It's sort of like a central, spoke, and it connects, the downtown to sort of Tinner Hill to Winter Hill. It's an important area. We have a bike lane there now, but we really need some protected infrastructure there, I think. Like Mr. Puentes, I'm a fan of the traffic circle, but it needs to work for bicyclists. So I was happy to hear that you may have an alternate plan that would provide a safer passage for bicyclists, hopefully just safe passage. But I think that's something that I would want some reassurance that is being built for bikes, and that we're using every opportunity that we have right now on Maple to really build real bicycle infrastructure, because we can build that now and then build out from that. And I think that would be really valuable. I think that is it. I guess I just want to also say that I think that preserving the tenants that are there are Falls Church institutions in that building. I think that's a really important thing. And having a solid interim parking plan is really critical for that. I think that's it.
Thank you. And if I may respond just a couple of things, and Thomas and Nini, I don't know if you're available to talk about the architecture. I think you had walked through some of the architectural changes from last time, but thank you very much for those comments. Appreciate them about the parking, about South Washington Street. The cohesiveness, it's sort of by design that the Maple Avenue facade and the Broad Street facade are a little bit different. And then we've done what we can as far as enhancing the facade of the existing George Mason Square, so there's consistent architectural dialogue. But I appreciate the comment too. It's on the fence about cohesiveness versus it's kind of funky, and it's kind of where the city, the downtown should be, is reflective of different architectural styles and patterns. In terms of the tenants, we have had very good conversations with all of our tenants. We've had outreach to all of them. We've met with several of them, and we have worked hard on our parking plans. Our interim parking plans, establishing things like a community liaison, ensuring that no sidewalks are closed, but doing everything that we can to make sure that those, as you say, community institutions are not negatively affected during the pendency of the construction. But I'm happy to provide additional details on those, but we have included several voluntary concessions that seek to address those things, some of which need to be approved by the city manager, as far as the plans go and things like that. Again, in terms of green space, and I can't remember what I think our landscape open space on the site is a little over 15.5%, which exceeds what is otherwise required. And appreciate the comment about the park and maintenance and things like that. I will say that I should have corrected myself. Aside from the grocery store comment, the issue about the park and what should go in that space probably has dominated more time. The feedback that we've received is that it should be welcoming open space for this area because it's so prominent. It needs to be sort of a community gathering space. Some have said that there should be a pavilion there. Some have said that it should be a dog park. Some have said that it should be one solid tree, and others have said it should just be all trees. So we're kind of taking all of that, and we are going to be working with the Recreation and Parks Department, hopefully before we even go back to City Council on this and meeting with them, just to see, from a maintenance perspective and from what the Department of Public Works can do, what are the needs? What's the best use of that site? And it may not be a dog park. It may not be just lawn. It may be something else, but we're committed to sort of finding that out. Actually, before I turn it over to Thomas, just talk about architecture. Pete Crawford, I think you are a civil engineer on this. And just to clarify, when we first proposed this project, so Rinker Design is the city's consultant for the traffic circle, or just studying the intersection. And we had gotten a hold of their CAD drawings, I believe, Peter, and we had provided suggestions based on some of the comments that we had received about making sure there was safe bicycle route through that traffic circle. But Pete, is there anything that you can add to it at all? But again, this is a city project. We were kind of just helping them along the way with some of the geometry for that one issue. But Pete, have I left anything out or misstated something?
No, I mean, the extent of our involvement in the coordination is, like you said, it is a city driven project. But what we've done is we've exchanged design files and ensured that what we're doing on our side has left them adequate room to do whatever they need to do on their side. There's been some design collaboration as far as, if a bike lane should go through or should not go through. But ultimately, I think that decision is up to the city and what they direct their engineer. But either way, we've given them adequate right of way to do whatever they need to do at that circle.
So I don't know if that addresses some of the issues that you had brought up, but if there's anything else I can speak to, I'm happy to.
I think so. I mean, do you have details of what the interim parking plan is going to look like? Was that included in the materials and I missed it? Or are you still working it out?
Yeah, I don't know, Mr. Rizzi, if you had included in the materials, but yeah, we have submitted that to staff. I'm sure it was included as an attachment at some point in time, but happy to forward that again. It's a couple of pages. But it basically talks about 175 or 172 parking spaces, I believe, kind of where the Matt's Tailoring Building is and the BB&T Bank Branch Building is, as sort of the first stage in all of this. And then once that temporary parking lot is constructed, that then allows the existing garage to come down. Construction parking will have to be located probably directly across the street behind the Burke and Herbert parking lot, or at some other off-site location. And then once the new parking garage is constructed, but even before, things on top of the garage are constructed or other buildings around, that would allow then the temporary parking lot to be eliminated, allow all the sort of the permanent parking for the existing George Mason Square tenants and the 150 South Washington tenants to go into the new garage. And then that allows the where the grocery store would be and the retail and the office buildings would be to sort of come out of the ground at that point in time. That's sort of like a high level kind of a view of how we're proposing to stage this, if that makes sense.
That's helpful. Thank you. Did you want to invite your architect to speak to some of the?
Yes, certainly. Thomas, I don't know if you're around. I mean, Thomas Davis Carter Scott, same firm that did the I think the 301 West Broad Street building was referenced, and same firm. But Thomas, do you want to speak at all to any of the architecture or?
Sure, Andrew. Thank you very much. Good evening. No, thank you very much for all the comments that I've been listening to tonight. We have been making some modifications to the architecture since the beginning, based upon a lot of comments that before we actually got moved on to the next step. The intent here is that we don't want to make all the buildings the same. We want this to be, as it's something that was grown through years as a city, with different types of architecture. Actually, I believe last week we had a very good meeting with the Architecture Review Board, and we went through a lot of these issues of the building. They were very complimentary of the architecture of the building, even to the point where I think that they like the way that we've been treating the garage, since it's actually been changing a lot since the beginning. There was an issue that actually I'm working on right now, which is, they brought a good comment as well. There was the corner of the building of South Maple and West Annandale, which is actually the tallest, I should say, the tallest point on the site, because the site drops on that corner. So we're actually in the process of looking at the facade of that building. They made several suggestions, which I thought they were actually pretty good. And we will be making those changes and bringing those to you shortly in the next, I believe, few meetings on that as well. And touching a few things here and there on the architecture. So
Can I ask one follow-up question on that? The 115 feet height, is that proposed throughout the site, or because I know that there's a grade down, is the building higher at Maple and Annandale, or is it 115 feet at Broad and Washington? I guess is my question.
The height is measured from an average site grade, which means it's 115 feet from the average grade. There's some locations on the site where the building is actually lower than 115, and there's locations where the building is higher than 115. For instance, on this location, on this corner, I believe the building is 121 feet to the roof.
And so what's the height at the opposite corner at Broad and Washington Street?
It is 106. And then as you turn the corner, then you have some height at 88. So it varies throughout the site. But the tallest is actually, I believe it's 121 feet, actually 8 inches.
So, and Thomas, just to pick up on that, I guess there's a couple of things here too. If you take a look at the Harris Teeter building, they use average site elevation as well.
Correct.
Right. So if you're sitting at, right in front of Harris Teeter on Broad Street, at Stratford Motor Lodge, looking directly across the street, that's about 88 to 90 feet off the ground at that location. And then if you go to Mr. Brown's Park and are standing in front of that because of the topography, as you're standing there, that's about 105 feet. So the tallest point of the Harris Teeter building is actually on the back side of that building. And so that's about 105 feet is what's right at the corner of, right across from the CVS and from Dogwood Tavern.
So we're looking right now at, as I mentioned before, the corner right across from the roundabout. We're looking at the architecture and carving the building somewhat so that it actually comes down. So we're going to take some articulation and move it back so that the building actually steps at that corner. And we'll bring those to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I think Mr. Stevens, go. You're up.
Okay, my turn. I had a couple of questions for staff and then a few comments. The staff report on line 46 and 47 mentions the need to have remaining staff comments in attachment 17. And I'm just wondering, are those all administrative issues, or are there any significant needs there still to be met?
I believe those are mostly minor administrative issues. As Andrew said, they have made interim changes between the second submission and the December 13th council hearing. And then they, as I just heard, they've also made more, they're planning to make some more architectural changes. So those would all need to be incorporated in the revised submission. And the intention is to then address the staff comments on the second submission in that revised submission. But I think, if I recall, most of those were minor administrative items.
Okay. The second question I had to do with public art, and I think the only document that we had was the voluntary concession document that was from December, which I'm sure has been, overtaken at this point. But at that point, it mentions that the agreement was to spend at least $25,000 on public art. It's left up to the owner. There's a reference to consultation with the Arts and Humanities Council, but it seemed to be a process that's quite different than what we had from the public art in Founders Row 1. And I'm just curious if you might be able to kind of highlight why is it so different between this project and the role that the Planning Commission had as we did with Founders Row 1.
Andrew, did you have something to say, or?
No, I don't know if that was.
No, that was addressed to staff. That was either Mr. Stoddard or to you, Mr.
Sure. So happy to chime in on that one. So I think if memory serves, when Founders Row 1, when the special exception was approved, I think the VC committed to including the public art as part of a future site plan amendment. And so the stipulation was made at time of SE that the public art would be reviewed as a site plan amendment. Otherwise, public art isn't something that typically rises to that level of approval. Typically, art would be a by right action. And I think even after there was the vote on the SE for Founders Row is when we actually had to come up with the process to review public art as a site plan amendment. Obviously, the final vote was held by the Planning Commission, but a lot of the input came from the Arts and Humanities Council. So I don't know that if we worked out the specifics, or Andrew or Adam, you had something specific in mind. But I guess I would suggest that we've got sort of a tried model, so it's something we could certainly reuse.
Yeah, I'm going to be attending the Arts and Humanities Council meeting tomorrow morning, where I'm sure this will come up. So I'm sure they'll have some interesting comments to share.
And I think that would be consistent with the addendum to the comprehensive plan for public art that was adopted. That generally the idea is that if someone's just out there investing in art, then that's a wonderful thing, and they should feel encouraged to do it. And then I think when art is being volunteered as part of a special exception or some sort of entitlement vote, that there do be some level of public review or public input onto the final design of it.
Might be a good idea for this project as well, as opposed to very much that language read as by right, and it does have public implications. So anyway, just an observation there. I did attend the Architectural Advisory Board's meeting last week, and I would characterize the comments from them as being cautiously favorable. They did have some concerns about the height difference between the new building and the George Mason Square, but kind of thinking about this myself, I think there's some linkage between things that the city is asking for that's kind of plays into why this new building is so much higher than the George Mason Square, and that has to do with the affordable housing ask, which we all want, of course, and also the fact that we're asking for 100,000 square feet of retail and office at a point in time when the marketplace is really not looking for huge increases in those areas. And so I kind of look at it as when we ask for these things, then the kind of something else has to give. So we wind up with a new building that's a little bit higher, or quite a bit higher than the older building. I don't know that that's all bad. I mean, in urban areas, you don't necessarily want kind of everything looking the same, and having some variety in heights and so forth gives what at least some architects call a fine-grained look to the development of a city. So not my area of expertise, but I've heard that kind of discussed in multiple ways. One thing I'll be looking for when it comes time to make our resolution to City Council is the need for better coordination of the rollout of the commercial space with the residential. And we've kind of learned that lesson a bit from Founders Row 1, and I think we should utilize those learnings to encourage the developer in this case, which I think will probably happen because I'm guessing that Atlantic Realties is a little bit better schooled in the whole area of commercial development than was Mill Creek, and that hopefully it can bring expertise to bear so that that this project comes together closer to being at once, as opposed to having a big division between the residential and the commercial spaces. I think it's commendable that you're offering the 5% on the spaces, parking spaces for electric vehicles. This is an issue that's emerging, so to compare it with past projects may not necessarily be a good thing, because where we are today is quite different than we were with respect to electric vehicles 5 years ago or 7 years ago. I think that I would still like to look for some type of a commitment as far as the conduit to service future electric vehicle needs, so that future tenants don't wind up in a situation where they're not able to have their vehicle charged because of the great expense of putting in chargers when there is no conduit. And conduit is just, my understanding is not very expensive at all to put that in at the time of construction. So I would associate myself very much with the comments of Mr. Fuentes regarding the traffic circle. I experienced and used traffic circles extensively for a whole year that I lived in New Zealand, and they're all throughout the country there, and they work quite well. They tend to slow traffic down, but they keep it moving, as opposed to traffic lights, which you come to a stop, you got to sit and wait, and then when the light turns green, everybody wants to go real fast, and that's where the danger kind of sets in. So hopefully the city can come together and see that this is a good place to install one of those. So I'll leave it at that.
And if I may respond, just a couple of things. Yeah, I appreciate you bringing up the Architectural Advisory Board issues, and I didn't want to paint a picture that they were uniformly positive comments. But a couple of things that they did raise. They wanted also a clear path for loading, making sure that there was a safe path off of Annandale Road to separate pedestrians from vehicles from loading vehicles. There was one comment about the arches. We have a series of arches along Annandale Road. And just to clarify, the inspiration for those arches, I think it was misstated the Architecture Advisory Board, but the inspiration for those arches actually came from the older Falls Church Bank, which sat at the intersection of where George Mason Square is now, and it had arches along the South Washington Street facade and then along the West Broad facade as well. And there were also questions about the width of the sidewalks along the drive aisle going into that. We have those widths as well. Just make sure there's adequate pedestrian widths. And then also just questions about signage and lighting for that drive aisle as well. So just a couple of the additional comments. We are taking a look at the architecture, as Mr. Nini said, and I think in terms of the commercial space, yeah, I mean, Atlantic, it has a large portfolio of commercial projects. It has a strong leasing team in KLNB, and I mean they lease millions of square feet regionally, but they also have extensive experience in sort of vertical type development as well, as is shown in Pearson Square and Tax Analyst, which it developed. And coming out of the ground, the first part of the building will be the office and retail components on the ground floor. The residential will follow. And it behooves nobody, especially Atlantic, to leave those spaces vacant. So, we think that we have a strong retail plan in place. We have a strong retail team in place, and we do have we have been in negotiations with the grocer for the space right at the corner. So I think we all have seen what's happened down the street as far as boarding things up, and it doesn't look very pleasant. We have absolutely no desire to make that happen, but I just want to let you all know that. And Adam, I don't know if you want to speak to the commercial component and leasing at all.
Once again, Andrew, I don't know how much more I can add to what you have said. We are a local developer. We do currently own and manage about 4.5 million square feet in the suburban DC area, and we've been doing this for a long time. And if you had to ask me what my bread and butter is, it's more on the commercial side than anything else. But with that said, we do visualize the importance of the mixed use, but without having confidence in the commercial side of this, we wouldn't build the project.
And in terms of the public art portion of it, I'm happy to have that conversation, and would like to learn more about what occurred there. The approach, and we'll share this tomorrow, Mr. Stevens, as well. I mean, the approach that we've taken to sort of public art generally is the $25,000 contribution, or not contribution, but at least a minimum of $25,000 of public art installations on the property, and then consulting with the Arts and Humanities Council on the artwork. We will be perpetually responsible for that artwork, and so obviously we want to have a say into what goes there. We have the exterior LED screen to broadcast events, screen on the green events at the end of the drive aisle. We also have preserved the ability to close off that drive aisle periodically for public gatherings and festivals and fairs and theatrical performances. The City Center Park, which will include park signage consistent with the city's signage and branding, but we have also committed to doing public art and sculptural elements there. But again, all of that is hopefully, we're going to be fleshing all of that out with the Recreational Parks Department and with the boards and commissions. We also have a breakout and performance space at the end of George Mason Square, where we have agreed to work with the Little City Cash Foundation on programmatic elements, both in the Boone Earth and hopefully in that space as well. And then I think you had seen, even though it's not part of the special exception application, or it's not part of the voluntary concessions, our project view book that shows the improvements to George Mason Square, to which we are obligated to be in substantial conformance with, does show public art murals along the blank facades of George Mason Square, where today there are no windows. In terms of height, I agree. In order to achieve what we believe to be a successful land use mix, in order to underwrite the building's costs and ensure the viability of the project's, the commercial uses, having that daytime foot traffic is very important. We have fewer residential units than Broad and Washington and the Insight, the Rushmark property at the Harris Teeter building. And if we are going to have the 43,000 square feet of office uses plus the 66,000 square feet of new retail, which I think is the largest commitment to commercial uses recently for a mixed-use project that's not at the high school site, and have the transportation improvements, the streetscape enhancements, along all 4 blocks. It's not just, it's not just on 2 sides of the road or 1 side of the road, but it does require additional height to pay for those items. We don't believe, though, that the height is disproportionate to surrounding land uses in terms of height, bulk, or scale. We think it is harmonious with the existing development. We are surrounded by roads and major roads with substantial setbacks on all 4 sides. And then something else that might not be appreciated is that we are at a lower grade than other projects along West Broad Street. So even though we would be taller than, say, the Harris Teeter building, we are, as you look down West Broad Street at the intersection, we are lower. We're also not immediately adjacent to residential areas. And, if we go back to the city's planning policies, this is designated under the small area plan that Mr. Hyra had brought up for this section of the city, and particularly in the downtown planning opportunity area. And I believe too, Adam, correct me if I'm wrong, but 115 feet in height was approved previously under the prior iteration of the city center project as well. And I do agree with Mr. Stevens about, from a good urban planning perspective, you don't want everything to be at the same height, but a downtown really should have a variety of heights to avoid sort of a monotonous rhythm and to create a dynamic skyline. So I don't know if this is sort of mission creep, because this is pretty much the center of the downtown planning area that's designated for it. The area that's right across the street where Dogwood Tavern is and Mr. Brown's Hardware, lower heights, lower densities. But this site here in particular is the one that was granted additional density. So just to respond to that issue.
Coleman, your hand back up, or does that from before?
Sorry, I just had one quick follow-up question. The mention of the screen on the green reminded me that I wanted to ask about that. So your intention with that screen, most of the time, is it going to be sort of like promoting the uses of One City Center, or just kind of public art on the screen? You mentioned that it would be used for like screen on the green, which is great. We have a very successful screen on the green on the green at Cherry Hill Park right now that you might have attended. I was curious, like, first, I want to know, what is it going to look like not at night when you're having those very few events, what will it be used for? But also, like, have you actually calculated like how many people could fit in that? I'm not saying that necessarily that the Cherry Hill event will move to your location, but if you were to have another event, similar event, how many people could actually fit in the Woonerf? Have you sort of figured that out?
Yeah, well, just as far as the what it would be used for, the voluntary concession, advertising obviously for the tenants in One City Center and in George Mason Square is pretty much what it can be used for. When we talk about commercial advertising, we're not looking for to advertise other things or have commercial messaging that's not related to our tenants. And it's very important from a leasing perspective that people know what the tenants are in the building. But there would also be ambient, imagery, the types of things, just to break things up and provide visual interest. We also intend to be able to broadcast things like Watch Night, so that this area sort of feeds into Watch Night along Broad Street and becomes one larger area of downtown. But also other types of city events. We have the Memorial Day Parade for people that want to just see what's going on a block away. And then again, as you mentioned, sort of screen on the green events. But I think during the daytime, you're probably looking at commercial advertising, and Adam, you might want to speak at that, but also sort of, again, there's that sort of ambient, imagery, be it, seascapes or, art, whatever it happens to be. I think there's a lot of creative things that can be done with that. In terms of the size of the Woonerf, I don't know if we've calculated how many people can physically fit in there. We're happy to take a look at that. The size of the Woonerf, just the dimensions, are 57 feet wide by 214 feet long. So from a square footage perspective, and I think I've used this analogy on, I'm sorry, Ms. Teets and Mr. Stevens, you've heard it 1,000 times, but if you take a look at North Lee Street between Park and Broad, between the Kensington and the Broadway, that's roughly sort of the dimensions, that, if you were to close that area off, though it's a little bit more elongated than that, but that's roughly proximate if you were to walk between those two buildings. But happy to like do sort of an analysis about if we set up a series of chairs, how many people you could fit in there. But it's also an area that you could set up tents, for outdoor festival markets, beer festivals, wine festivals, that sort of thing. And I hope that the screen on the green at Cherry Hill Park never moves to this location, because I like going there to watch movies. So.
So do I. I guess I want to align myself then with Mr. Stevens' comments about the importance of engaging with the Public Arts Commission on their recommendations for art, for if you're going to be including sort of ambient imagery on that screen. That screen is very prominent. It's large. It's visible from Broad. It is recessed, so it's not like a real very Times Square-y, but it will be very visible to the public. I'm not sure, honestly, how I feel about it having ads for tenants on it, 23 hours of the day, most days of the year. I'm not a huge fan of that, to be honest with you. But maybe other folks will feel differently. But yeah, and even beyond the screen, I think there are some other pretty large sort of in the concepts, like some other quite large public art installations. And so there's going to be a lot of character that those decisions will bring to the project and to this area in the city. So I think it's really important that there be a process for the residents to weigh in on what that will be.
Adam, do you want to speak at all to the screen? I mean, I don't think it'll be 23 hours a day between you, just advertisements, and certainly not just blaring at you. But do you want to speak to that at all? Adam, are you there by any chance?
Well, I mean, Andrew, I can also speak to that. I mean, the idea is to have some music and some art that goes in the screen. So it's not always advertising, but it's something that is just an ambience, like Andrew explained, in terms of have some imagery. Even when you look at a computer, sometimes you have some imagery, with some music and things like that. So that's kind of the idea. There will be advertising for the tenants in there of upcoming events. We intend to adhere to have some, the movie night, the concert on the Woodnorth. I mean, other things like that, that will be in there. So it's not always just, advertising for the restaurants or things like that.
But I think, we'll take a look at that. It's a good comment about just trying to coordinate things. And again, we'll get feedback tomorrow from Arts and Humanities Council on this as well. So we'll be back to you in March with.
Thank you. Yeah, I think a plan for the screen and how it will be used. I understand it will bring a lot of vibrancy to the project. I understand why you want to have it, but because it's so visible, and if there is also going to be sound associated with it, I think that the public will want to really understand what that's going to look and feel like.
Sure.
Understood.
Okay. Well, the benefit of going last is that I think almost anything I might want to have mentioned has been brought up, but I mean, just to underscore what some others have said, I mean, I support the roundabout. That's not a direct, part of this project, but I think that, I support that. I think that can work. I support the height. I think this site is, kind of our 100% corner. It's not proximate as proximate to residential, just to low density residential or lower height residential as most of our other mixed use projects have been. And I think that's a significant difference. In addition to sort of the precedent being set to the density that's already been approved on this site previously. Less parking, I would also support that. I think the parking garage is still pretty massive, and I would certainly support less of that. I mean, the kind of interesting architecture. I mean, it's architecture is inherently a little subjective, but having some variety. I don't think we want all our developments. We don't want to be in a situation where, because of many of our mixed-use developments came online during the same, decade or so, that they all look alike. I mean, that can make a place look very dated and tired. I think like when I walk around parts of Arlington and Ballston, and you can pick out, everything was built in like the 90s, and it has a sameness to it that we don't want. So I support a little bit of variety and things that are different, even if it, initially it maybe seems out of a little out of place. I mean, I think we're looking to create, continue to create Downtown Falls Church as a place, and this is the heart of downtown. As far as that goes, I've said it probably every time. I continue to have concerns about a grocery anchor. Perhaps again, there are folks a lot more in tune with the market than me, and it'll be a wild success. on top of all the other groceries that we have. But I also concerned about us becoming like the grocery city, as sort of our main anchors. I understand, it brings in a fair bit of sales tax, but unless Richmond starts changing taxes on groceries, which I know was brought up in the last election. But anyway, concerns about the screen. I mean, I think like the closest thing I can think of, which is a much bigger screen, of course, is over at Mosaic, and the screen they use there for a number of different things, and of course that's not visible from sort of the public right of way. It's all kind of internal, but anyhow, so just concerns about how that would be used and making sure it doesn't become a distraction or obtrusive. And I think it sounds like the applicant understands that and is not looking to do that, but it needs to be. We might need to look at that, or that might be something council needs to look at, putting some controls or limits on that. So with that, I said this at the very beginning. I know as of now this is scheduled to come back to us in two short weeks on March 2nd, and what we would like to see, what I'm hearing from I think every commissioner, is something tangible that kind of gives us a very good feeling about what the direction you're moving in, as far as incorporating the numerous comments and recommendations you've received from us and from others. And so something conceptual, but that gives us a good feel for what comments you've incorporated and where you're looking to go. And I don't know I know staff has kind of thought about the schedule and feels it's reasonable, but if you feel that that's reasonable to be able to provide us with something in advance of the March 2nd meeting that we can consider, then that would be the way I would see this moving.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to. We've got a lot of wood to chop, obviously, between now and then. But we will be back in front of you with thoughts about the direction that we're moving. I don't know if it'll rise to the level of a complete resubmission, because I think our next submission is not for several weeks. And once we get back in front of council, but I'm happy to go back and work with our team together on addressing some of these issues, even on issues that we have fundamental disagreements on. I think it was a pretty healthy discussion, about the housing from Commissioner Hyra. I really appreciate his point of view. Even if again, we're happy to have the discussion with city staff. And again, we did within the last 2 weeks have a discussion with housing staff on that. I appreciate Commissioner Tietz's concerns about the cohesiveness of the architecture, the height of it, what the park looks like, and then the other comments as well. So I want to let you all know that I hope that you all do not get the impression that we haven't responded to anything. We've been taking all these comments to heart, and we made a lot of changes over the last year before this got even back to the Planning Commission after the referral up to boards and commissions. So we thought critically about it. We hope it shows. We are excited about the project, and we really do appreciate your feedback. So when we return to you in 2 weeks, we will be able to give you an indication as to the direction that we're heading on a lot of these critical items.
Excellent. Okay. Well, very good then. Then we will look forward to reviewing that and having the public hearing on the 2nd of March, and we will go from there. So again, thank you to the applicant team for sticking with us for what turned out to be a longer discussion than I anticipated, but I think we did hit a lot of important points, and I think you heard some of the concerns, serious concerns that are still out there with us and others, and we'll look forward to seeing your resubmission and considering this on March 2nd.
Right. Thank you all.
Thank you. All right. Well, fellow commissioners, takes us just about to the end of the agenda, but item 8, our information items. Are there any planning commissioners' reports that they would like to share? Seeing any? Could just be the late hour. Or no, wait. This Commissioner Comont.
I have one. I just want to mention I was able to attend part of the Housing Commission meeting in Mr. Hyra's stead the other night. And one thing that was mentioned is that it sounds like they are making progress at, sorry, now I'm blanking.
Virginia
They are
Village?
making progress at the fields. Yeah, no,
Oh,
no,
the fields. Oh, that
yes.
too. Are good.
The issues at the fields are actually being dealt with, and that we're not just hearing that from the owner, but those reports are actually being confirmed by residents. I think that there's still more to do, but that's a sort of bad situation that is getting better. And then the other thing I wanted to mention is, I mentioned in my comments, but the CECT wrote a really great letter on with some recommendations for what the city could do to move forward on its bicycle infrastructure. And I'll send it to Emily and Paul to share maybe for the next meeting. But I just thought it was a really nice overview. And Andrew Olson and Jess Hegenbart also submitted a letter to the Falls Church News Press last week about the need for more staff resources so that we can actually execute on some of the many bike and pedestrian projects that we have in the queue. So just wanted to mention those two things too. That's it for me.
Great, thank you. Anybody else? If not, then I think that brings us to a brief director's report from Mr.
Sure, I'm happy to be brief. The two things that I included in your written report for this meeting, first is just to keep you up to date on grant applications. Carrie Odinino was our lead on this one. She submitted a grant application to the Northern Virginia Transportation Commission, NVTC, for operating funds to support the city's bike share system, the city's portion of the capital bike share system. And if awarded, the grant would be expected to pay for the operating costs of the system that aren't already covered by system revenues or station sponsorships, as well as staff time to manage the program, and then marketing efforts to support bike share as well. The longer write-up is for our department level budget proposal. So this is our internal budget proposal to our finance office. But as called for in the Planning Commission's rules of procedure, you guys are supposed to exercise oversight over our budget. So I wanted to give you a heads up on what we had submitted, what we were requesting. So this first line here runs down a basic outline of how the department's budget breaks down. The biggest item, obviously, is salary and benefits at approximately $3.2 million for the fiscal year. And just as a reminder, the CPEDS is short for Community Planning and Economic Development Services. And that includes 4 divisions. It includes economic development, it includes planning, zoning, which currently includes the permit counter, and then also building safety. After salary and benefits, the next biggest expense is bike share operating at $150,000 a year. Uses of the tech fee revenues that are tacked onto building safety permits, $47,000 of that used for software, computers, and vehicles. And then other operating expenses for the department are $67,000. The big thing we're trying to do with this year's budget submittal is get ourselves right-sized to be able to properly staff West Falls, as well as other projects that are already approved or under consideration. The rundown on the staff requests it sounds like a lengthy list, but I can certainly motivate it. So 2 FTEs for building safety for commercial and residential plan review, permit technician to reduce delays at the counter, zoning FTE to have a more fully staffed zoning team, 2 planners to manage a combination of West Falls and major development applications, and then to make permanent the part-time or the term economic development marketing position. It sounds like a lot of positions, but really what's motivating it is a couple things. If you go down to the slide, the first bar chart, this is a bar chart pulled together by Matt Marion on our building safety team. The vertical bars represent workload by quarter, and it's each of the different colors in the bar represents whether it's staff training, routine work, or major applications. And then the solid blue line that's tracking along, usually right at the top of that curve, but then slamming right into the middle of that bar, that's the staff availability. And so when West Falls comes online, right, it's 9.5 acres of development, well, 8.5 acres in the first phase, 8.5 acres of development. At the same time, Founders Row is still doing tenant fit outs. Broad and Washington is going to be starting construction. And so what building safety is worried about is that they won't actually have enough people to review the plans or inspect the buildings as they go up. So that's motivating the request for 2 new FTEs there. The second slide, if you scroll down, this is a chart. It makes a lot more sense to me when I talk it through. The first time I saw it, I had a lot of questions. This is also a bar chart by month, and the color codes represent the length of delay that an email sat in the permit counter's inbox until someone had time to open it. So it's not how long it took to get a response, it's just how long it took us to actually get to the message. And you can see one of our worst months, for example, was June of 2021. Where there were 14 messages that were in the orange, and that means the message sat for 6 days or more until someone could actually get to the message. And so when people say, well, gosh, what are your current staff doing? Well, they're overworked. So if you scroll back up to the text, the last paragraph before the charts. So when you look at what we've got, there are 24 full-time employees in the department already. In total, I just ran the numbers. We have, across the 24 employees, we have 690 days of banked leave. When you calculate that out on an FTE basis, that's 2.7 years of working time. So we're already in the hole about 10% of our staff. And then at the end of the calendar year, we also lost a lot of leave collectively to rollover limits. In total, the 24 employees had 87 days of paid leave rollover from annual to sick. So it's a good policy that it maintains the leave. It still shows up in your balance sheets, but that's 87 days of vacation that people should have been taking during the calendar year that unfortunately they weren't able to get to. So that's our budget request. We'll see how this pans out as it goes through the process. Of course, this gets molded in with other departments making their requests as well. And this gets presented to City Council, I believe, in March, and then it goes through the budget process, and action should happen in May. Just one thing I want to highlight about the positions is that someone says, well, gosh, how's the city going to pay for all these things? Well, that's the trick, is that these projects actually come with not a revenue stream from the fiscal impact, but a revenue stream from the permits. If we can pull up the last attachment, I guess, for this. Yes. So this is going to be a chart that'll be interesting to try and walk people through on Teams. But what this is looking at, ooh, that's much better. Okay. So right in about the middle of the chart, you can see there's a number of $6.8 million. A little bit to the left. Emily, if you're able to move the oven mitt. A little bit left. Whoa. Ah, you've been logged out. Let's see. If you're, I don't know if people are able to find the $6.8 million. There we go. So that's the revenue projection for the buildings that are already entitled. So I'm sorry, and the 2 that are under consideration, but that's the West Falls Phase 1 and Phase 2, Broad and Washington, and then currently under consideration, Founders 2 and One City Center. So that's the permit revenue alone for those 2 projects. And so what we've done is in the columns in the right, what we've tabulated is what happens as you start adding these positions and what happens to the use of those fees. And what you can see in the lowest right number is that even after carrying these positions through fiscal year 25, there would still be a reserve balance of permit fees of approximately $4.7 million. So you could continue to carry those staff costs for several years, and that's even if new projects weren't applied for or approved.
Paul, are you looking for some support on this? Should we be writing a letter, sending some emails? Because, all the studies show when you guys leave that much leave on the table, it is super bad for retention. Yeah. And, because it just leads to staff burnout. At my company, they've now switched us to a minimum. We must take 3 weeks off or we get in trouble.
I like that policy.
I think a department trip to Hawaii or Florida or something, I mean, is in the cards so far.
Team building.
Federal government, we
See
don't
Mr.
do our
Duncan.
trainings in Las Vegas.
See Mr. Duncan writing notes, taking furious notes here. He's going to talk to Wyatt, I think, tomorrow about some of these ideas. So, I think. Yeah,
Well, no, whenever we produce a budget, we're always conscious. In producing this one, I was pretty insistent that we got to go back to what's in the council work plan, what's the work that we've already got programmed, and then obviously we're not going to go to the general fund and say we need to increase our staffing by a gazillion % and take it all out of the general fund. So we're looking for what do we have available. So we looked at permit fees, we look at the tech fee, we look at what can be funded through CIP billing, we looked at ARPA. We're trying to the extent we can, right? I mean, that's part of sort of how you pay for growth is you have the fees from the development pay for the staff to actually manage the process.
No, we get that, and I think you certainly the data certainly supports it, and I mean, one thing developers hate more than anything else is delays, and that's not what we want to have. Is encourage all this development and then have it be excessively delayed because of something like a lack of staff, to be able to, review simple, things like electrical permits and do inspections. So we get you. So I'm glad it's good. I think, you're smart to be looking, ahead, several years because there's a lot in the pipeline and it's all, going to have to come through a relatively small staff. And then I think you're very wise to be signaling, ringing the alarm bells. I know you're not the only one because it is coming. This come on. I didn't see who was first, but whoever wants to jump in.
I think it was me. I'll be quick. I just want to say it's not even just development project delays, but there's also like city infrastructure projects that are not happening because we don't have enough staff, like the WNOD trail crossings. Maybe not for a few more years. The hawk signals on Broad Street, like there's sort of a Sophie's choice there, I think, at the moment. Maybe that's been decided. I don't know. I'd vote for the trails, but there are obvious needs for more staff in your department. So any letters that I need to write, I'm happy to write them. But yeah, I think we're asking you all to do more work than you physically are able to do. And you're sacrificing your leave to do it. So it's admirable, but should not be necessary.
Thank you.
Mr. Fuentes, do you want to add something?
I know, just a quick question. I know it's late. Why is the bike share operating cost in the budget here? Why isn't it elsewhere in the city?
Oh, in another department?
Yeah.
So sort of an oddity to me as I got into local government. The budget only exists by department. So every expense has to be budgeted under some department. There's no there's no function other than the departments. And so I think the two logical places it could have landed is either public works or planning. The reason it sits under planning is because it was Carrie who rolled out the bike share system. And so since she was most associated and familiar with the funding, for historical reasons, it just ended up inside the planning budget.
We need a bike.
I was just going to say, for similar reasons, when you look at the pie chart on city expenditures and it says what's being used for community development, the WMATA operating and capital funds are also under community development, but they're much larger than our entire budget. So I always look at that chart a little bit funny and I say, gosh, that would be a great slice of the pie to have.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right. Well, like I said, Bob, you need us to rattle any cages or help support you guys because you certainly you guys do so much with a small staff. It's actually quite amazing. I know the staff has grown over the last decade, but not by that much. And the amount of development has increased much at a rate that's way much quicker than that. It's true. I mean, you can't do everything at the same time. So necessarily some things could be prioritized, but with what's coming, I think it's going to be quite the challenge unless you get some extra people. So hopefully others in City Hall share that view, and I suspect that they will. So, okay, well, thank you for that. We don't need to take any action on that, right? That's just for our information, but, and take some more vacation too, Paul. I mean, I think, we'll have their information tell you and your staff to take some vacation. Anyway, all right, well, there's nothing else in the director's report, and I don't think we had any official correspondence. We did get a letter on the work session item, which we didn't mention. We should have mentioned it. We did get a letter on the work session item for One City Center from former Mayor Baruch, actually. So I hope everyone read that. And other than that, unless there's anything else for the good of the cause, we will see everyone in 2 weeks on the 2nd, and we'll call tonight's meeting adjourned. So thanks, everybody.
All right. Thank you all very much. Very interesting.
Good night, all.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
All righty. Bye-bye.